Hello and welcome to this special edition of To The Point. My guest this week is Shankar, Aiyar, Congress MP from the Rajya Sabha. Welcome to the show, sir. It's a pleasure having you on. Let's get straight into the interview and start with the Bofors controversy. It's come back to Parliament. It's being discussed in Parliament. You made a passionate defence just a couple of days ago.
No, I have to interrupt you. I tried to make a passionate defence, and these fascists on the opposition benches prevented me from speaking, as they keep preventing Congress representatives from defending their case after first kicking up a fuss, preventing Parliament from functioning, then getting their leader of the opposition to make a statement, and then preventing the Treasury benches from speaking. This kind of devaluation of democracy is a far more dangerous thing for us than anything to do with Bofors. But please continue.
Right. It's a very interesting point you make. We'll come back to that in a bit. But do you think, especially after the Swedish cop gave all his details, came out with what he had investigated, do you think it's time, finally, to put the Bofors controversy, if I could call it that, to sleep now?
It had gone to sleep a long time ago. In fact, far from having just gone to sleep, it had been deeply buried a long time ago. Along comes this Swedish police commissioner, who is obviously not a person to be trusted, because as chief of police, he's leaking things to journalists instead of investigating themselves. And I think the most crucial question, which he has neither raised nor answered, is why did he not investigate the role of AE services further? Because the whole of that case is that Bofors hired, or AE services came into the picture, and then Bofors made a payment to an account indicated by them. Now, when I remember years ago looking at these papers, I found that on the 13th of October 1989, which for me was historical because that's the day I left the Foreign Service. But it was on that day in the morning that the Indian Express and the Hindu, which had been hounding Rajiv Gandhi on the Bofors issue, carried a report of what the financial director reported to his boss in Bofors on the interrogation he'd been subjected to by the Swedish investigative agency. And he says in that, I quote, he says, on AE services, I was not pressed. The key question to ask is, why was he not pressed? And why did the chief of police of Sweden not insist that he be pressed? And then why is he asking us to investigate who the recipient was? What did they do about investigating Martin Ardbo, who is the self-confessed giver of the bribe? And then he goes on to tell what I can only describe politely as a lie, that Bofors sent a team out. Of course Bofors sent a team out in July 1989. And they told Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi that we'll give you the information as to who has been paid and where, but on strict condition that you keep it to yourself, which in effect would have made Rajiv Gandhi an accomplice after the fact. And that is the reason why all the investigation that has been done for a decade and a half after Rajiv lost power, largely as a result of the false propaganda that had been done on Bofors, there's nothing that has come out that we don't know, except that Mr. Quattrocchi appears to have been paid. All right? Mr. Quattrocchi was a long-time resident of India. He was a businessman. He had many contacts in the political world as well as the business world. The relevant contact in the business world in this case is Mr. Hinduja. The case against him, which was supposed to be decisive, was closed, and nothing further happened because the court said that there was not enough evidence for it to stand up.
But do you think, Mr. Aiyar, now that these facts have come out and he's giving his testimony saying that Rajiv Gandhi, of course, had no comprehensive role there, don't you think the Congress position and your position over the years has been vindicated, and the opposition who's been hounding the Congress party on this issue has taken a fall?
Of course it has. And today's, this morning, I'm talking of the 2nd of May. On the 2nd of May, Ritu Sarin has an article in the Indian Express which shows how incompetently the NDA government handled this matter. They didn't follow up, they made delays. And of course, we all know that the present leader of the opposition, in his capacity as the additional Solicitor General, had made so many mistakes in the course of his advocacy of the opposite cause that it was not till 3 or 4 years later that information was received as to which accounts payments have been made into. And that information was available to the government in 1998, and they could do nothing about it from 1998 all the way through till 2004, nothing effective about it. So it is quite clear that not only have they not been able to nail anybody, but if I may for a minute come back to Mr. Quattrocchi, because his is the name, and he is a man who's still alive, which is being constantly raised in connection with Rajiv Gandhi. I was saying to you a minute ago that he was a long time resident of India.
With all kinds of
and
contacts.
he had all kinds of contacts. Now, in the political world and the business world. In the business world, as I said a minute ago, his principal contact in the Bofors affair appears to have been Mr. Hinduja, or the Hindujas as a family. And whatever evidence they were able to turn up against the Hindujas was regarded as not standing up in court. But the more important is the political contacts. Now, there is in the Ardbo diaries the reference to a gentleman called N. Many of us can make an informed guess as to what was the identity of N. But surely any intelligent media or governmental investigation of this matter should have involved a very deep interrogation of whoever N could be. But neither of it was done. Chitra Subramaniam has in fact claimed in the book that she wrote on this subject that her editor deliberately left out all these things because there was a politician called N who is related to the Gandhi family and who was a minister in the Rajiv government and was kicked out on his backside in September 1986 and then joined VP Singh. Now, why did the governmental investigating agencies not even ask a question of N, whether the particular N I have in mind is the one concerned or not? And again, I find in an interview I gave to PTI that they have excised all these references because whom are they protecting?
Right.
What I want to know is if the case is not closed as of 2012, the person to be investigated is N, who has never been asked a question either by the media or by the government.
We can all take a fair guess of who that N might be. We'll take a short break, Mr. Aiyar, right now. We'll come back and talk to you about your party's performance in recent polls and what future role you see in the party as well. Don't go anywhere. We'll come back and have a chat with Shankar Aiyar. Keep watching To The Point. Welcome back. We're still in conversation with Shankar Aiyar. Mr. Aiyar, the recent UP polls that the results didn't really go your way like you had expected. You had said, you had come out with a statement saying that backing Rahul as the leader of the party in UP is a risk that the Congress will have to take. Didn't really go your party's way. What do you think the reasons were? Was it because Mr. Rahul Gandhi couldn't really connect with the people like Akhilesh Yadav could, or do you see other reasons behind the poll debacle?
I don't remember at all the statement that you're attributing to.
You gave it to the media. I read it in the morning. I'll check my facts and I'll get. But you just say that backing Rahul is a risk that the Congress will have to take.
I don't remember having said any such thing. The point was that Rahul Gandhi threw himself into the fray on the most difficult turf that the Congress party has had for the better part of 2 decades. Here is somebody who could quite easily have helicoptered himself into comfortable, assured places in politics, certainly in the party, certainly in the government. He chose neither. He chose to go in to the lion's den like a Daniel, as it were. And I back that. I think it was very, very sensible of him to first earn his spurs, as it were, by riding the most difficult horse. In a sense, it has been a huge success. For in 2 successive elections, or rather in 1 election, he succeeded on the one hand in winning 21 seats in Parliament, and on the other hand in having the Congress in front in as far as in as many as 95, I think, assembly segments. Now, the attempt was made to build on that. The attempt has not succeeded.
But why do you think
because
that
we are,
is? Why do
let's
you think
come
that
to
is?
that. Let's get the facts right. Because we managed to get not very many more seats in the assembly than last time. Principally, that is because an assembly election is not a parliament election. It's quite clear that the Congress was never in the running to become the party that would lead the government. It could have perhaps played a kingmaker's role if the gap between the SP and the BSP had not been as wide as it was, and if the Congress had done somewhat better. But there was no question ever of the Congress becoming the number one party in the state.
You were hoping for in making inroads at best.
No, it was not a question of inroads, it was a question of reviving the party in the single biggest state of the Indian Union, and one without which we can never hope to come to power in Delhi on our own. So it was really catching the lion by its tail. And I would like to compliment the young man on choosing the hardest path of all. Now, it was his associates who made predictions that were a bit wild. Number one, it was assumed that 95 assembly segments in the Lok Sabha poll would equal 95 assembly segments in the assembly poll. That, I think, was a mistake. There was a sense that we were doing better, and this got exaggerated over time from 125 even into a prediction of 200. So it was the hype and the hyperbole rather than the actual performance that is to be decried.
Do you think that Congress actually can make a huge comeback in UP, given the state of affairs right now, given that the SP has come back to power, given that the regional party in that state are still extremely powerful on the ground as well as otherwise? Do you think the Congress still has a chance of making that state its own after a very long time?
Let me ask you an alternative question. Does the Congress have any alternative to trying to come back on its own? Did you know in 1984 that Mulayam Singh Yadav was going to be the next Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, or that Lalu Prasad was going to be the next Chief Minister? Did anyone dream even in 1990 that we were going to have in Mayawati a 4 times Chief Minister of UP? Politics is not only the art of the possible, it's also the art of the impossible in terms of predicting what will happen in the future. What a national party has to do is to try and try again. So we are in the position of Robert Bruce, looking at the spider climbing the wall and finding that twice it has failed and succeeds the third time, and therefore he goes to war against England for a third time. So we will have to persist. And I think the steps that Rahul Gandhi has taken are in the right direction. I would only hope that we would persist and that we will come out trumps. Every time we have a Lok Sabha poll in Uttar Pradesh, I think our performance is likely to somewhat improve.
Right. Let's talk about the government for a bit. UPA 1 did a fairly good job. UPA 2 has been accused not just by the opposition but by the business community in India, India Inc., so to call it, of having this policy paralysis, this new famous word, mindset. Do you agree with that? First of all, my question to you would be, do you think, in your opinion, you've been a former minister, you've been a former cabinet minister as well, and a former diplomat as well, do you think as a government, UPA 2 has sort of let down its core constituency and also hasn't really delivered on the economic reform promises that it had promised the people when it came to power? Do you think there is something lacking there, and do you think it can do better?
I think one of the reasons why I'm on the margin is that I have openly maintained that all that has been done in the last 2 decades has ended in India prospering, but Indians not. And therefore, I am unconcerned about fat cats feeling that there's policy paralysis. In any case, the Indian economy is functioning far better than almost any other economy in the world. And its performance on several parameters is superior to that of the Chinese economy, because the Chinese economy is being driven by unbelievable levels of debt, which are going to reach $22 trillion in a matter of the next decade. So in these circumstances, I don't see what our fat cats are complaining about. They're doing very much better than they would have done if our government had on the economic plane functioned like the governments of the United Kingdom or the United States or of Spain or of Greece or of Italy or of France.
Do you think that
So what are you complaining about? Yes, there was a rate of growth of 9.4% that was achieved in, I think, 2007. When it was achieved, don't forget that the world was awash with bogus money promoted by Alan Greenspan's policies. And that bogus money resulted in the crash that took place at the end of 2007 and became totally evident
The subprime
during
crisis.
2008.
So
Now
I'd like to
we
interrupt you
have
there.
we have ridden that crest, and therefore I do not think our economic policy is anything to be decried. But at the same time, the fact that we have maintained and strengthened allocations to the social sector and to subsidies to people who are in need is a far more important measure of our economic performance than the kind of things that Dalal Street and Nariman Point complain.
On that note, we'll take another break. We'll come back and talk to you about your political future as well. As you're a former petroleum minister as well, I'll have a question on petroleum prices as well. Don't go anywhere. Shankar Aiyar is still with us. Keep watching To The Point. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. Mr. Aiyar, let's talk a bit about your own political future. Some people say that you're the best minister that's not in the government right now. Would you be considering there's this big news that a reshuffle might happen, especially after the session's over, if the opportunity comes and if they want you back in the government, would you consider it at least?
Look, I'm a nominated member of the Rajya Sabha, and therefore it is not until a conscious decision is taken to have me resign from that nominated position and have me re-elected to Parliament, either the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha, within 6 months, that there could even be any consideration given to the strange proposition that you're putting to me.
But in case that happens, in case the party does want you back in the fold, does want you as a minister, and they're willing to get you re-elected and giving up your current nominated position, would you consider it?
Look, the Prime Minister of India, according to our constitution and parliamentary practice, has a unique right to decide who his minister shall be. And if the Prime Minister, the highly unlikely condition of the Prime Minister of India asking me, there's no question that as a disciplined member of the party, whatever you think of my discipline, as a disciplined member of the party, I would of course jump at the opportunity. But I think in realistic terms, my ministerial career, for what little it was worth, is completely over. And I don't expect to be a minister ever again in my life. In fact, I see my political career ending in 2016, when in any case I'll be 75 years old. I would love to have an opportunity given to me by my party to have another shot at getting into the Lok Sabha elections, into the Lok Sabha in the 2014 elections. But given the political concatenation in Tamil Nadu, I don't think I would be considered as a candidate by my party for my constituency, the one that I have fought 6 times over, won 3 times and lost 3 times. So I think it is the end of the road. I am in the Vanaprastha stage of my political career, and I am expecting to pass into sannyas in 2016.
Mr. Aiyar, you've been petroleum minister before and a cabinet minister. There has been a clamour for deregulating diesel prices and petroleum prices. Of course, India Inc., like we mentioned before, thinks and is of the opinion that it's hurting the economy. The subsidy burden is killing the government. Fiscal burden has to be somehow eased out. Do you think it's high time that the government deregulated petroleum products?
I think these views are rubbish. These are views, as you correctly said, which are articulated by chambers of commerce and confederations of industry, and then Nariman Point and Dalal Street, as also very, very widely in the pink papers and editorialists of a right-wing disposition. But the fact of the matter is that the taxes forgone in the year 2011-12, I'm only taking the very last year, that is the money that has been left in the pockets of those who pay direct taxes, in the pockets of the corporates, and to some extent in the pockets of consumers, amounts to 5.25 lakh crore rupees. And the total subsidies plus a social sector and anti-poverty programs burden amounts to under 4 lakh crore rupees. So all we need to do is to get more money out of the rich in order to be able to sustain all these programs. There's no problem of fiscal management, except that the rich of India also are in cohorts with Switzerland, Cayman Islands, and so on and so forth. So the minute they are made to pay their legitimate taxes, they say, no, we won't pay it, and they take it away to one of these tax havens, or they take it, or they do a round trip through Mauritius to convert their black money into white money. We have got a pistol held in the hands of the richest Indians being put at the temple of the poor people of India. And we have fallen victim to this blackmail. And that is the only reason why subsidies and expenditure on social sector and anti-poverty programs is seen as a burden, whereas stimulus is encouraged with respect to the richest Indians, people who build private residences of 27 floors and then don't go in to live in them. So I have very, very little sympathy with the view that we cannot afford this. On the other hand, I also agree that because we have shifted so much of the burden of industrial development and therefore economic growth into the hands of the private sector, we need to keep that sustained to get revenues required for social sector and anti-poverty programs. Now, with this in view, what you just said about people saying that it's impossible to bear diesel prices, deregulate them, this is not something new. It's been going on ever since the first experiment at deregulation in 1997. And when I was the minister, it was then thought unbearable that the price of crude oil had risen from $10 as it was till about 2002 to about $32 when I was the minister. And today we are talking about getting to $132. Now at that time I enunciated the principle of equitable burden sharing, which meant that every time there's a rise in the price of crude oil, the upstream companies in India like ONGC take a hit because they have to pass on some of their rentier profits to the downstream companies. The downstream companies take a hit because they cannot market in India at international prices, which is what they call under recoveries. And the government takes a hit because it has to adjust the excise duties and the customs duty to match with that. And all of us do this, and whatever remains of the burden is then borne by the consumer. And to my mind, all this talk of deregulating these petrol prices, diesel prices, etc., is talk that emanates from ivory towers of people who took their MAs and PhDs from Oxford and Harvard and had their career out in the World Bank and the IMF. The ground reality here is that hundreds of millions of Indians have no electricity in their homes. Why should they be deprived of kerosene? And all this idea of sending them a cash subsidy, I'm ready to experiment with that. But if they get the money in their pockets, but kerosene is sold only in the open market, the prices in the open market will rise. Even an economist like me, who intelligently decided to cease to be an economist at the age of 22 after having stood first in Delhi University and taking my MA degree from Cambridge in economics, I just know, even I know, that prices in the open market are determined by supply and demand.
Right, absolutely.
So whatever is the rate at which you pay these people, when they go into the market, the prices will rise.
Absolutely. Mr. Aiyar, we're completely out of time. I wish this was a 1-hour interview, but it is not. Thank you so much for talking to Rajya Sabha Television. That was Shankar Aiyar, former minister, former cabinet minister, currently member of the Rajya Sabha. We'll come back next week with another guest, with another special edition of To The Point. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.